Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Tiana here, and I am from the likes of the Maxi Toys videos here. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll present to you our first redo Let's Play for the sake of 2024, because I know for a fact that, well, we originally did this game right here for about 3 previous times in the past, ranging from 2013, 2015, as well as 2017, but I'll explain more about it until whenever we get into the actual gameplay. And on top of that is about the fact that you probably already know that Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is gonna be coming, so as a result, I figured we must able to tackle through a whole bunch of Sonic games, not just for the sake of the forms of redoing Let's Plays of, but also about the fact that we might come across into new ones as well. So, time will tell, especially, as you can tell, we are currently going to be doing our redo Let's Play of Sonic 3D Flickies Island, aka Sonic 3D Blast. Now, this game did first came out in 1996, for the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis, but not just that, this game also gets its release not only for the Sega Saturn, but also on the PC as well, which I'll explain more about that until whenever we dive right into the actual game. Now, the version we're going to be playing on right now is the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version, just because we figure we might able to actually just to go ahead and play for this version in particular, because I'm more familiar with the Mega Drive version / Sega Genesis version. So because of that though, yeah, as you can see, we're able to actually ended up in the main menu right here, which obviously shows you the controls and sound test and you name it. So, Flickies are mysterious birds. They live in another dimension and can travel anywhere through large rings. Oh, this kind of reminds me of the Sonic movie vibes with all that particular dimension rings. Robotnik learns about the Flickies. I will change the Flickies into robots and have them search for the Chaos Emeralds for me. Using the infinite power of the emeralds, I can conquer the world. Well, it looks like Dr. Robotnik's up to no good again. Sonic visits Flicky Island to see his friends, but the only thing he finds are robots. Oh jeez, it looks like we got ourselves some bit of enemies that we need to take care of right here. Robotnik made my friends like this? I must save them. Robotnik must be stopped. Sonic starts to defeat the enemies in order to rescue the Flickies who are trapped inside. You know, just like it evolves of how it does it since in 1991, since the first Sonic game. Go Sonic! You can warp through the big rings with the help of the Flickies. Chase after Robotnik and defeat his plans. Okay then, so that's the main premise of the forms of the plot in this game, is that we must rescue all bunch of Flickies before we go for this particular dimension ring, and obviously rinse and repeat basically. So here it is, here's the forms of Sonic 3D Flickies Island, aka Sonic 3D Blast, for those of you who lived in North America. Basically though, it's about the fact that if you played this game either on the Mega Drive / Sega Saturn, including the PC version as well, obviously this game's perspective is all isometric. So because of that though, you know, think of like the forms of how it does it for Sonic Labyrinth, except the fact that obviously you gain speed, and on top of that you can jump. And on top of all that stuff though, you can collect rings as always, and also in addition to that is about the fact that, as you can tell, that we actually got ourselves quite a few shields that we can able to interact with, although I'll explain more about it in a moment, because here's the first special stage in the Mega Drive version or the Genesis version of Sonic 3D Blast special stage. And those special stages are pretty easy, especially considering for the fact that, for those of you who don't know, Sonic 3D Blast does contain 3 different special stages depending on what version of the game you're playing. So obviously we are playing through the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version. Obviously we go walk onto the bridge of any sort while dodging spike balls, and you're able to collect rings. So the more you collect, the more rings, then obviously you move on to the next section. So for instance, about the fact that in the beginning portion of the special stage, you obviously need to collect about 50 rings, and then when you get to the second section, you're able to actually collect 100, and the third and final section right here, you need to collect about 150 rings. And as I said this before, those types of special stages are ridiculously easy. Although, unlike the forms of how it does it on the Sega Saturn version, which originally though, I was expecting to try to able to tackle for the Sega Saturn version of the game, but I couldn't able to actually access to my capture footage of it. So because of that though, Yeah, as a result, no matter what though, you can still able to jump on enemies, just like the forms of how it does on the previous Sonic games, as be expected. And on top of that, there's also some of these shields, like for instance, we've come across into this strange yellow shield, which, by the looks of all that stuff though, this is actually called a homing shield, which is almost like a precursor to the forms of the actual signature moves for Sonic in Journey forms of Sonic Adventure for a homing attack, which as a result, yeah, it's pretty much, you know, every time whenever you jump in midair and you press the jump button again, and that way you can able to directly home in onto any enemies. So that'll come in handy, because I will admit though right away is about the fact that a lot of people seem to really dislike this game most of the time. Well, I would say it's okay, but it's not my favorite Sonic game in the world, because obviously there are a couple of issues that I have with the game. Like, for instance, for example, is about the fact that the isometric view can be very disorientating at times, mainly with the forms of the later levels coming up. So, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that you probably get the gist of it, So anyways, as far as able to actually access the special stage as far as this is concerned, as you saw from earlier, basically we need to once again collect 50 rings. However, the biggest difference is this time around compared to the forms in the previous Sonic games is that you need to find either Knuckles or Tails, at least specifically on the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version, and same applies with the forms of the other two versions as well. Basically, if you do manage to find either Knuckles or Tails, and if you deliver them 50 rings or more, this allows you to able to transport to a special stage. However, here's the catch to this though, is that depending on what version of the game you're playing, getting all 7 of these Chaos Emeralds in this game is actually really easy to able to get them all early on through the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version, because as you can tell, that basically if you manage to complete one of the special stages from earlier, you can able to actually participating in doing another one during the forms of throughout the act. So basically, for example, I'm about to go after all 7 of these Chaos Emeralds. I almost said 6 for some reason, because I keep thinking about the old Sonic games since Sonic 1, as well as the forms of Sonic 1 on the Game Gear, along with the Master System, and you probably named the rest of it though. So, potentially speaking, I was about the fact that yes, this is going to be a full 100% playthrough of the game. As a result, as we expected, we're going to be collecting all 7 of those Chaos Emeralds, and relatively speaking, I was about the fact that you probably get the gist of the actual progression of this. So, anyways, so let's talk about the forms of the reason why this is our 4th time playing through the game, like while looking back in Journey forms of the previous years that we did technically already did this, but of course those playthroughs are no longer there anymore. Well, here's the thing. We first did this back in 2013. Like, the quality itself while looking back is pretty bad, because obviously we did somehow use the really stupid bad quality camera. Like, it only runs at 420p. Like, that's just not right. And we did this again during the forms of in 2015. While the quality itself is good all in all, however the sound mixing is pretty bad, because obviously you can't hear the commentary very well, and on top of that is about the fact that the actual commentary itself is pretty messy. And also we did this for the 3rd time back in 2017, but of course that particular version of that playthrough is no longer there either, mainly because the commentary sound is really awful. Like, it's all muffled up and everything. My guess is about the fact that back in 2017, our first microphone is actually broken, and as a result, it can no longer register our commentary, which that's the reason why you probably already noticed ever since in our playthrough of Tails Sky Patrol and stuff like that for the Sonic's Game Gear Marathon. So yeah, you probably get the gist of the idea about the fact that this is a reason why we've decided able to do this game again, except this time around though with hopefully much more better performance. So as you can tell, the main premise of the forms of Sonic 3D Blast, as you can tell, in order able to go from one stage to the other, or should we say some sections throughout the forms of some stages, is that in order able to go from one section to the other, at least depending on what stage you go into, in order able to progress, you need able to collect Flickies until you're able to defeat certain robots, in order able to get the Flickies out of the robots. So, and you're going to be doing that for the majority of the forms of this game in general. So because of that though, yeah, some people might find this a bit repetitive, but even then though, you probably get the gist of it. So, Anyway, so the first zone we're going to be exploring into, as you probably already know, that's what appears to be Green Grove Zone, which is basically like a typical Green Hill kind of style of world or something like that. So, but I'll admit though right away, it's been ages since we've last played this game, and I think the last time we played this game was actually back in 2017, believe it or not. Well, technically speaking though, the last time I did technically play this game on a different version, that's what appears to be the SEGA Saturn version, I did somehow manage able to got myself not only the SEGA Saturn version, but also with the Mega Drive cartridge version back in 2019. So as a result, that's a good thing I somehow managed to still got myself my SEGA Saturn, along with the forms of the SEGA Saturn version of Sonic 3D Blast, or Sonic 3D Flickies Island. Now, generally speaking though, is about the fact that for those of you who don't know either, that obviously about the fact that this game on the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version only came out on the English countries, or like, let's just say, for instance, the Mega Drive version did somehow exist in the European countries, and meanwhile for the Genesis version did somehow came out as well for the American version. However, the Japanese version of this particular version of the game does not exist, although it wasn't until in 1999 of all things that basically not only does the Sega Saturn version does get the actual English release, from 1996 for the American version, 1997 for the European version, and on top of that, the Japanese version is going to release until 1999, which is roughly around the same year as when, well, let's just say the English version of Sonic Adventure roll around for the Sega Dreamcast. So, pretty strange for that particular release time, especially concerning for the fact that obviously the Japanese version of Sonic Adventure already came out during that time. So yeah, it's kind of strange, kind of think about it. I'm guessing it's probably because the Sega Saturn was actually quite popular in Japan, unlike the forms of how it does on the English version for some reason. I'm guessing it's mainly because the sales units might have something to do with that, but either way. So anyways, let's move on to the third special stage right here. So of course, no matter what though, it's about the fact that in these special stages right here, as I said before, we need to dodge a lot of spike balls and collect such an amount of rings. However, if you dare touch the spike balls, if you don't have any rings, you get kicked out of the special stage. So because of that, there's actually a multitude of attempts you can able to do when it comes to getting all 7 of these Chaos Emeralds in this version of the game, as I explained this earlier. However though, there are some zones you can't able to actually access to special stages, but that wasn't until whatever we get to towards the end game, basically. So because of that though, oh yeah, something's worth noting for the sake of the forms of today's discussion, is that today's date, of course, here is the 10th of February today, in some cases in 2024 today. We've only got 6 more days to go until Mario vs. Donkey Kong Remake is going to be coming for the Nintendo Switch. So, still very excited about this though, especially concerning for the fact that maybe if it's a possibility that we can able to tackle that particular remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong, but this time around on the glorious Nintendo Switch. So I don't suppose about the fact that with any other Mario vs. Donkey Kong Let's Plays could happen anytime soon. Like for instance with Mario vs. Donkey Kong Tipping Stars and all that stuff. So yeah, you get the gist of it. Oh yeah, the good news about the forms of how if you do manage to complete certain special stages, obviously certain rings, including item monitors, do tend to respawn. So if you accidentally manage able to get the actual other shield that you didn't meant to able to grab, well obviously if you're trying to complete, if you go into the special stage, obviously if you do manage to complete it, and if you go back into the stage regularly, then you should be able to actually get yourself some of these items back in during the forms of that specific respawn points. So the only time exception to this though, and that's what appears to be the enemies, because once you defeat one of those enemies in particular, those enemies does not respawn at all. So yeah, you get the idea for this point. So, however, unlike the forms of how it does it in the multiple versions of Sonic 3D Flickies Island, is that the way of able to actually get all 7 of those Chaos Emeralds, depending on what version of the game you're playing, I'm pretty sure on the Sega Saturn version, in addition with the PC version as well, you only have 1 attempt to able to get those specific Chaos Emeralds in each act, just because if you're trying to do find either Knuckles or Tails, like for instance, if you're trying to find Tails for only 1 time in one of the levels, and if you complete the special stage, you get yourself a Chaos Emerald. However, if you find Knuckles, or, you know, vice versa though, really, you can able to actually participate in a special stage again, However, you do get a different reward instead of the actual Chaos Emerald, so I just want to classify that for the sake of notifications of, you know, depending on what version of the game you're playing. So, also for some reason, on the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version of these Chaos Emerald sprites, or models, they look a bit weird in this game, whilst usually speaking though is about the fact that unlike the Sega Saturn version, including the PC version as well, they almost act out like the forms of the proper shape of the actual Chaos Emerald models. Maybe it's just me, but either way. So, there's another set of comparisons I can probably think about in regards to the forms of depending on what version of the game you're playing. If you play the Sega Saturn version, in addition with the PC version as well, every single music is entirely in CD based, whilst compared to the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version, as you can tell, it runs on a cartridge. So because of that though, you might able to hear some of these familiar tunes, like for instance, since we've got a 1-up, that particular jingle was actually heavily borrowed from Sonic & Knuckles' 1-up jingle, or specifically, Sonic 3 and Knuckles' 1-up jingle. So, kind of strange to able to actually have that on here, but either way. So, I'm pretty sure in every single sections, as you can tell, we need to gather all 5 of those Flickies, depending on what sections you go into. And usually, relatively speaking, though, is about the fact that the more you're trying to hold up with those Flickies, you're able to actually get yourself some ton of points if you manage to able to deliver all of those Flickies in that dimensional ring on that specific session. Like, for instance, since we actually gathered 5 of those Flickies, that pretty much gives us some ton of extra points. However, if you dare manage able to deliver one of those separate Flickies at a time, obviously you get less points. I'm presuming so anyway. So, then again, it's been ages since I've last played this game for sure, because potentially speaking, it's about the fact that I've noticed about the fact that a lot of people, you know, did not like this game as much. Well, it's most notably because the controls in this game is a little bit too much of a sensitive side, mainly because usually on the Mega Drive / Genesis version of this game, obviously you can only take control of Sonic with a D-pad, which is a bit cumbersome, especially concerning for the fact that obviously this game is on the isometric viewing, so relatively speaking, you get the gist of it. So, anyway, so as you can tell, that we keep on collecting certain Sonic tokens, and basically, is that the more you collect them, I think you can only collect them up to like, I don't know, 10 tokens or something. I believe this actually gives you a continue, so that's something worth noting for if you manage to able to go into the hardest aspects about the game. So, geez, I spent almost 6 minutes in Act 2 for a Green Grove zone. But anyway, here we go on to Act 3, where basically, just like the forms of how it does it on any other Sonic games since Sonic 1, basically though, Act 3 pretty much leads us to the boss. So basically, here we have Dr. Robotnik is gonna able to act like a claw machine, basically. Like, he keeps on grabbing the actual spike ball, and as soon as he drops the spike ball, the spiky ball just bounces all over the place, and it stops at one point, and then Robotnik decides to dip down, and it's your chance to able to attack him. Well, here's the thing though, you can only attack his glass dome, because obviously that counts as a hit, because if you hit him from each either side, if you are lower, basically though, that does not count as a hit. So, but either way, the first boss is pretty easy, especially concerning for the fact that I pretty much know about this ever since whenever I first played this game on the Sonic Mega Collection compilation for the GameCube. So, alright, so here we go on to the second zone in Sonic 3D Flickies Island, or Sonic 3D Blast. That's what appears to be by the forms of Rusty Ruin Zone. Now I will say that the Mega Drive music, or the Genesis music in this zone, it's really dang catchy in my opinion. I mean, sure, no matter what though, is about the fact that some people prefer the Saturn music, just because it's a little bit more atmospheric and all that stuff. Speaking of something a little bit more atmospheric, is that I've noticed about the fact that there's another huge differences between the forms of the Sega Saturn version compared to the Mega Drive / Genesis version of this game. That's what appears to be about the fact that, well, it does have some very cool graphical upgrades in regards to the forms of specific graphical changes depending on what zone you go into, and also on top of that it does contain some weather conditions. Like, for instance, we're exploring through Rusty Ruin Zone right now. If you played the Mega Drive or the Genesis version, obviously it's all daylight and everything. However, on the Saturn version, along with the PC version as well, if I'm assuming so anyway, it's all raining. So because of that though, I really do like that specific detail, so that might be saying something. So, and also some people complain about the forms of not only because of the controls. Oh, and by the way, if you hear that jingle, that's how you get the continue. So because of that though, again, you can only get like, I don't know, 10 of them, of those Sonic tokens. So I think that might be the reason for it. So anyways, let's just go ahead and be very careful not to get hit, although there might be a couple of times where sometimes controls can be a little bit of a ludicrous sometimes, and also again because the isometric platforming can be very disorientating at times. So, and also there's going to be a lot of platforming involved during the forms of the isometric platforming involved, so it might be a nuisance if you manage able to go into the later stages in the game. And trust me, what I'm saying is about the fact that the other zones coming up will be potentially going to be a little bit more annoying in regards to the forms of what platforming is involved. So, but either way, that's for a topic for a later time. So, but anywho though, and as you can tell, I've messed up trying to able to, you know, access to a special stage with Tails. But that's just mainly because, well, as you can tell, the main gimmick of this particular zone, as you can tell, is that we stumbled across into those spinning panels, and basically though it's about the fact that you're able to spin around, and basically there are tons of pillars you can able to burst out of, and in order to able to get rid of them, is that you need to able to become a spinning ballerina kind of form, or anything else like that, until you're able to bust out those pillars. So, yeah, relatively speaking, that's the only method you can able to deal with right here. So, anyways, here's the new type of shield right here, or specifically, for those of you who don't know, this is what appears to be by the forms of a flame shield. Well, the reason why I say this is because, well, we'll explain more about it if we go ahead and backtrack for a bit, because currently at the moment right now, I'm still trying to able to grab certain amount of rings so I can able to actually access to the well, presumably the 5th special stage, because as far as I'm aware, we're basically in a halfway point in terms of able to actually go into special stages department. So, anyway, so we've actually got enough rings for now, so now we need to backtrack, and, oh jeez, we got to be very careful at this point, because obviously if I mess this up, then obviously I'm gonna have to able to just try to forget about it and just try to focusing on something else. But again, there are some multiple ways you can able to go for this point in regards to the forms of how many attempts you're going to be dealing with. I think it is possible that you can able to actually gather all 7 of those Chaos Emeralds in just in the forms of Rusty Ruined Zone, whilst unlike the forms of how it does on the Sega Saturn version, in addition with the PC version as well, I believe on the 4th zone in particular, that you can able to actually gather all 7 of those Chaos Emeralds until you reach the 4th zone, which as a result, it is definitely possible if you go into like multiple acts. So, and then some people complain about the forms of the massive amount of load times on the Sega Saturn version, mainly because it runs on the CD discs. So, relatively speaking, knows about the fact that thankfully the loading times is not present on the Mega Drive or the Genesis version. So, in fact, let me know in the comments down below for the question of the day: which specific version of Sonic 3D Flickies Island or Sonic 3D Blast do you prefer? Well, I will say the Sega Saturn version is a lot more impressive in my opinion, because it does have some very cool graphical enhancements, like for instance with the weather conditions, as I've already explained about this earlier, and on top of that with some cool graphical details, depending if you do manage to explore the majority of some zones. So, but either way though, also I just realized, since that we did somehow complete the 5th special stage, are you kidding me? Those pillars do respawn! Okay, fine. I'm gonna be perfectly fine with that, because I'm gonna go back onto the 2nd section. Yeah, some acts do attempt to lead you to either 2 sections or 3 sections, depending on what act you go into. So, anyways, let's go ahead and take down those pillars again, so just in case we can able to, well, activate this particular shortcut if we decide to backtrack for a bit. But that's not the only reason why we came in here, because if you go in here and spin dash onto this spot, you get yourselves an extra life. So, pretty easy though, especially considering for the fact that every time, well, you know what I'm saying, you complete the special stage, the item monitors attempt to respawn, so that's obviously a good thing. Now, in regards to the forms of the special stages types, depending on what version of the game you're playing, on the SEGA Saturn version is actually a lot different, and it's also very impressive as well, because obviously it focuses around, you go through a half pipe, and on top of that, this is actually the first time ever you see Sonic's model in 3D, which is actually kind of impressive back then, even for 1996 regardless. So, and as far as I'm aware, you have to collect a certain amount of rings, just like the forms of how it does it on Sonic the Hedgehog 2 special stages, where, oh cool, as you can see, since I've already explained this earlier, is that the red shield right here is actually known as the flame shield, where this protects you from fire hazards. So, pretty cool stuff though, especially it also includes the forms of flamethrowers as well. So, yeah, that's actually super handy, especially considering for the fact that there is one in particular zone coming up that it was actually pretty useful if you managed able to find the red shield or the flame shield for that matter. So, but I can wait and join at some point, possibly during the forms of it tomorrow or something. But of course, just like the forms of any other classic Sonic games up to this point that we're currently doing Let's Plays of, this particular game is going to be pretty short. So because of that though, thanks to the forms of our time length has been upgraded, and on top of that, you know what I'm saying. So, okay, so we need to bust out those pillars again, so, and of course we're not going to lose too much rings, because obviously I'm going to be, well, participating in for the 6th special stage, and around that time, once we get to Act 2, then obviously we will get the 7th and the final Chaos Emeralds just in time. So, anyway, so, unfortunately I've lost my flame shield, but that's okay, because we can able to grab this blue shield if we managed able to hit it. There we goes. So, yeah, no matter what though, is about the fact that I think, generally speaking though, is that if you, those of you ever experienced the PC version of Sonic 3D Blast, that version also has a different special stage. And except the fact that it's like a combination of the Mega Drive or Genesis and the Saturn mixed in together. I mean, it is definitely a little bit more uglier than the forms of how it does it on the Saturn version, because I will say the Saturn version special stages is by far the most impressive, because compared to the PC version, it's like, ugh, what the heck am I looking at? Well, I don't know about you, because I'm pretty sure it's like, it kind of feels a bit odd in some places, you know? But either way, oh, and something's worth noting for is about the fact that if you do manage to pause the game on the Saturn version alongside with the PC version as well, there's actually a built-in map function where you can able to tell where you're supposed to go, which as a result, it might be seems a little bit barren for that particular map system, but regardless of such though, if you manage to play this game countless amount of times, usually for the Mega Drive or Genesis version, then you feel right at home when it comes to knowing where you're supposed to go. However though, it's about the fact that, like I said before, I don't think it's possible you can able to do 2 Chaos Emerald special stages in one of those acts in the Saturn version and the PC version. So only the Mega Drive and Genesis version is only happened, so anyway, so 6 Chaos Emeralds down and only 1 more to go, but of course that will be happening until Act 2. So that should be, that should happen. So, yeah, that's as far as I can able to explain about this. Although aside from the fact that there's another, comparison between the forms of all three versions of Sonic 3D Flickies Island or Sonic 3D Blast, is that I believe on the SEGA Saturn version does have, FMV sequence, like usually for this full motion video intro, alongside with the ending cutscenes. So as a result, technically the Mega Drive and the Genesis version does technically has a cutscene, but it's more accurate, it's almost like 16-bit kind of visual identity or something. So anyways, let's move on to Act 2 now, and obviously, I think the final special stage we're going to be participating in for is actually not too far from here. It's just that we still need to be very careful of not to run into too many enemies, in addition with stage hazards as well, like those spikes as you saw from earlier. So I think we need to bust out those pillars again, and in order able to bust out this wall, we need to spin dash into it. So, and there's Knuckles here, so we need to backtrack for a bit. just in case we do need about roughly 16 rings left until we're able to actually get the final Chaos Emerald on this version of the game. So also let me know in the comments down below if you want me to tackle through the Sega Saturn version eventually. Well, we have no idea about the full confirmation just yet though, just because I still need to try to get used to with my new laptop's, you know, USB precision and stuff. Alright, here we go. The 7th and the final special stage, as in a Knuckles version. So, yeah, depending if you do manage to ask either Tails or Knuckles, I believe if you do manage to give away 50 rings to Knuckles, the special stage you transport into is obviously it takes place in a rocky mountain structure, whilst if you do manage to ask Tails, if you participate in a special stage, it does manage to take place in the skies above. So, yeah, that's the only other major things we want to classify this, so... But for the most part, is that, you know, those special stages are a total joke, especially considering for the fact that if you pretty much know what to do, then you have no troubles with this, especially considering that these kinds of special stages gives you a lot of rings. Like, seriously, I can able to beat all these special stages no problem, so... However, here's the thing though, since we did collected all 7 of these Chaos Emeralds, as you already know, unlike any forms of how it does it in, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, in addition with the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, obviously it doesn't grant you to become a supersonic transformation, which sucks big time. But instead, it actually gives you the actual benefit for the doubt when it comes to giving you the best ending, which as a result, yeah, similar to the forms in the previous classic Sonic games as far as around that time goes, So exponentially, I don't have to worry about keeping an eye on with the forms of ring counts, so all I have to do now is just basically just go from point A to point B, and as a result, collect some more Flickies along the way, and vice versa though, really. So, yeah, that's as far as I can usually try to able to discuss upon in regards of the forms of Sonic 3D Flickies Island, or Sonic 3D Blast. So, generally speaking, though, it's about the fact that, yeah, that's as far as I can say about it. Anyways, let's go into this little trampoline pad to able to progress or proceed. Still, I will admit though right away, I really love the Rusty Ruin soundtrack for the Mega Drive or the Genesis version because it's almost like, sounds a little bit more catchy to me. But either way, nothing even compares to the forms of how it does it for the later zone coming up, that it does brings us something quite familiar. And as far as you probably already know, for those of you who ever experienced Sonic Adventure before, one of those musical tracks in general, which appears to be in Green Grove Zone Act 1, obviously that track will get enhanced remakes on the forms of one of those segments in Windy Valley Zone or Windy Valley Stage in Sonic Adventure, where basically though you might actually heard that familiar tune, which appears to be by the forms of Green Grove Zone Act 1 for the Mega Drive / Sega Genesis version of that specific music, and you were able to get to hear that on Windy Valley, so something's worth noting for. And same applies with the forms of that intro sequence of that specific cutscene that as you saw familiar, where I believe that particular music track will be reused in the forms of Twinkle Park stage in Sonic Adventure, like whenever you try to able to play as Sonic in those little like bumper cars kind of segments, and that section is ridiculously fun. Like, I really wish if I want to go back onto Sonic Adventure again, but I'm afraid to tell you is about the fact that it's so difficult to tell at this point, because as a result, we're still waiting for Sonic Cross Shadow Generations is about to be releasing, so sometime in autumn this year, so still very excited about that, especially considering for the fact that we'll might as well go for, once again, triple dipping, just like the forms of how it does it for, not only for Sonic Mania Plus, but also with Sonic Forces, Sonic Colors Ultimate, Team Sonic Racing, in addition with the forms of Sonic Superstars, Sonic Origins Plus, and on top of that, Sonic Frontiers, you name the rest. So, for those of you who don't know what dipping is, meaning about the fact that we'll buy 3 versions of the game, except 4, because obviously that it doesn't seem it's going to be possible for us to able to actually get ourselves the PS5 version, so it's why I classified that. So, anyway, so that pretty much does it for Act 2, and now let's move on to Act 3, which once again leads us to the boss, where basically we have to fight against with this, well, let's just say, this little golem knight thingy right here, while Robotnik is going to take control of it. And basically, all you have to do is you have to stand onto these little claw thingies, or these little hands, and then basically you have to able to jump at the right time to able to hit the glass dome. And you have to watch out for his little hands when he decides to do a hand slam. And you also have to watch out for these multiple balls that are coming out of the actual body. So, yeah, for the most part, this boss battle is not too hard. So, you just have to get used to it with the isometric view. So, with that said, we have the endings up here. So, join me next time for the likes of Sonic 3D Flickies Island, as that we go on to the next zone, which is Spring Stadium. So, I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.